Alright, I didn't really feel like going out today or anything, so I just kind of stuck to streaming, but probably sometime later in the week I'll check out Downton Abbey and Men, and then we'll go into those also leading into Top Gun next week. So, yeah, let's start with the brand new one, which is Chippendale Rescue Rangers, which is on Disney Plus. Not in theaters, as John Mulaney continuously informed us when he and Andy Samberg had to unexpectedly host Jimmy Kimmel this past week. So that was fun. And speaking of them, that's kind of the mindset of going into this, because as you may have seen when we were doing one of our previous videos this week, I was talking to Ashley about how I wasn't sure if this was like a meta thing or it was like just maybe them slumming it or something, just something really random. Yeah, when I thought it might be some kind of meta thing, it turns out that I had no idea just how much so it was going to be. So it's another one of those. It is, you can sense a very, very, very heavy Roger Rabbit influence with the combining of live action and animation, but then, like, all the different kinds of animation in this really interesting way. And I guess I should just start right here by saying that, much like Roger Rabbit, this movie is full of what I guess you could call cameos by various characters from various forms of animation. So if you don't want to know what any of those are, I didn't going in, because I really didn't know anything about this going into it, apart from that it was probably going to be meta in some way. But I would go ahead and maybe stop here and not watch any further, because I really have no choice but to bring up some of these. So, and it's kind of a big key to how you feel about the movie, how surprising or fun these cameos are to you. So yeah, if you don't want to know any of those advance, I would go ahead and leave now, because I'm about to mention some of them. Starting with the fact that, yeah, not only is there extremely heavy Roger Rabbit influence, he's in here briefly as well, with many others. And you'll notice when all these characters start to come into it, it is that case of where you draw the line, because you have stuff like Roger Rabbit, where you see all these different characters interacting, and it was really surreal then, and it's kind of still surreal now, because they're coming from all kinds of different companies, also in different, places of origin, which is what made Roger Rabbit so unique. And here, it could also maybe be, well, this is also a case of, like, it's not just, Disney characters, like some DreamWorks characters will come in, and in various different places, from various different places. But I know when Ralph Breaks the Internet came out, it got a lot of criticism because people thought they were just kind of showing off, like, hey, these are the properties we have the rights to, look at all of them. This could also be lumped into that as well, so I guess it's really just a matter of your threshold of being self-referential or referencing other things and other characters and stuff like that. It is how they, like, at least here they utilize the characters become, part of the plot, and they, like, play certain parts in it. And it's not just saying, like, oh, here's these, there's a lot of, oh, here's these characters and then they're gone, just for the sake of it. But and it's, doing the whole, usually I don't get on the case of something being nostalgia based is necessarily a bad thing. But it did seem like they were kind of going all in on it here. They were being very reliant on it. But just at the start of it, though, is when you see the world that they set up, there is a lot of, like, this is one of those movies that has so many details. It's to the point that it's distracting, because all you're looking for is, like, background details and what all they've done to build this world, where it's like they have this combination of live action, but also there's animated like, we see them going to school, and it's just this mixture of animated characters and live action characters, and characters of different sizes, and the characters that are different sizes have things around them that accommodate that, like how people that are Chippendale size have this very small table in the cafeteria, and they have, like everything around them is small. But the really interesting thing about this also is, even though these things are small to accommodate them and they're animated characters, the things that they're holding and interacting with seem to also be live action and, like, real things. which is really, there's like they have an after party for Rescue Rangers at one point, and everybody's holding those plastic red cups, and they're like the real cups, but it's the animated characters holding them. It's weird, but um, but in a good way. There's a moment at the after party where somebody shoves like mixed nuts into Dale's mouth, and it's like we get this shot of Dale, and he's clearly animated, but the nuts that are the joke is already there in his mouth are like real, and it's like it's one of those cases where it is interesting. You can watch a movie in 2022, especially a movie like this, and still wonder like how exactly did they do that? Because so that's nice, and it's like I said, not only is it like different forms of animation, whether it be like the hand drawn or the CGI, like the 3-dimensional characters, video game characters, whatever. Puppets are here. So which might bring back unfortunate flashbacks like the Happy Time Murders. There's a little of that also, because much like the Happy Time Murders and Roger Rabbit, yeah, there is some sort of mystery that has to be solved in this movie, and that's where the plot kind of kicks in, and it does kind of start to feel a little familiar, and it's like the idea of it feels very sort of Roger Rabbit light, and you can see where after a while how thin the plot gets and the cliches that it relies on. It's like it comes back to me saying you shouldn't watch any further because I'm gonna talk about the cameos that are in it, and it's like, because if I just glossed over the other characters that are in this, there wouldn't be much else to talk about, and I feel like that says a lot about the plot and what we're working with here. Because that's the thing, is when you watch, Roger Rabbit, the reason Roger Rabbit is so successful and continues to be so successful is not only was it this very surreal blending of not just live action animation, but the different animated characters that we saw interacting in itself, but Roger Rabbit also has like an actual story with like actual developments and actual surprises in it. And this is where that kind of falters, and where you can tell after a while that it got really reliant on just, oh, look how many characters we've got in this, look how many jokes we can cram into this, and it's not, and usually, that'd be the job of a movie like this, is to, be jokes till the end, but after a while when it does kind of just start to feel like the same joke of, oh, there's this character, but it's not quite how they used to be, or something like that, or this is them after some time, or something, because our villain is built up for quite a bit, as a guy hidden in the shadows named Sweet Pete, and one of our big reveals, still relatively early, is that Sweet Pete is a jaded Peter Pan that has grown up, and now he's running this business. This is the part of the plot that is kind of clever, and something you could imagine being in like Roger Rabbit, which is he takes because the idea when we see like Rescue Rangers and how it was done, where it's like these are characters, and the shows that they were on, they were just like actors on. So we have Sweet Pete's plot is to take animated characters and alter them and put them into like knockoff movies and bootleg movies. So that's like they kidnap Flounder and then they put like a goofy nose on him and then put him in a Little Mermaid ripoff that you would see, like a mockbuster Little Mermaid. And that's a really clever plot, and very, very funny also. But that's about the extent the cleverness gets, apart from, as far as that and the world building, that's great and everything, but then you've got the rest of the movie to do, and the rest of the movie just kind of ends up being, how many more characters can we cram into this? Because another character who has a very surprising appearance here is the rejected Sonic from the 2019 movie, where he had like the human teeth and then they went back and fixed him. So who they just call Ugly Sonic is his own character in this. He goes to like conventions and stuff like that as Ugly Sonic and stuff like that. That's a clever joke also, but it was also the case of it was such a good joke and such a good reference that it really needed to be shorter than it was. Like I wasn't counting on him becoming like a character that's crucial to the climax. Because when we were first introduced to him and he's just kind of talking, and yeah, he is setting things up, but it was also this case of, wow, this is a good joke, but they're really lingering on it. And it's like, yeah, they were setting up stuff later, but it's like, I don't know, when you have a joke that's good, I feel like you should make it sparingly. So to like evolve him into a character that went further was something that I wasn't sure about. So, and there's also a case where this will be a very annoying movie later. after more people see it, because this is one of those movies where nobody will really pay attention to anything else. They will just be obsessed with being the first one to point out all of the supposedly hidden details that aren't even all that hidden. It's just all of that throughout. It'll be, oh, there's this thing in the background, oh, this reference and all that, and it's like most of them are pretty blatant. But I've expressed before how much I fucking hate the term Easter egg at this point because of how liberally it's used, I guess you could say. Where it's like something hiding in plain sight. We'll get that title, and people will feel really proud of themselves for pointing out, oh, here's this extremely blatant reference that's in my face, and the movie will be considered more clever than it actually is because of that. That's what the problem is. But they do add some touches here, but I feel like a while ago, like 20 years ago, they would have been like really sneaky or clever in a way where it's like if this movie came out like pre-Shrek, because Shrek is when we really started to see that increase of here's an animated movie for kids, but here's these other jokes in it also that they might not catch. And we get stuff in here like when they go see Monterey Jack, who is now voiced by Eric Bana, which is very funny in itself, which he does quite well. His cheese addiction is played up like, you know, like any other kind of addiction, like drug addiction or alcohol addiction or something like that. And it's like, that's kind of funny, but it's also, like I said, a joke that probably would have been more like, oh wow, they went there, maybe like 20 years ago or something. But like I said, it still has those moments, but it also has many moments where it feels really pandering. Like Ugly Sonic feels very pandering, and there's a moment where they go into... this is a funny joke in itself also, where they go into literally a place called the Uncanny Valley, and it's all the places with... it's all the characters that have what they literally in the movie call Polar Express eyes. As soon as they said we're going to the Uncanny Valley, I was waiting for either a Polar Express character or a reference to show up, and it was quick. And so we see, you know, the cats from, like, Tom Hooper's movie fighting in the alleys and stuff like that. Like, anything that's a knock on cats at this point just feels pandering because it's so fucking low-hanging fruit. But that's where a lot of that comes from. But they also take that... This is kind of the opposite of the Ugly Sonic thing, where I thought it actually worked, was one of the Uncanny Valley characters is this Viking played by Seth Rogen. And they don't do the joke too many times where his eyes are clearly looking in the wrong directions when he's talking because he's so poorly animated. And he's like the main henchman of Sweet Pete, and that's a character that I thought was kind of funny the whole time, that I didn't mind them sort of dragging out a little bit, so that was fine. But there is another joke where there's at least two jokes where this character laughs, and it's like they're trying really hard to draw attention to, hey, it's the Seth Rogen laugh. Everybody thinks that's funny. So it's a lot of that, but as far as like moments that do work that still feel clever, that are kind of outstretched a little bit, I guess you could say, are like, there's some details, like they eventually go through this, it's the machine that does the whole bootlegging thing to the characters, and I think it's Chip almost goes through this, and the only thing he comes out with is one ear that's like Snoopy. And I actually really did like the fact that he has that Snoopy ear for the rest of the movie. And it's like the commitment that they had to that, because it's a little over halfway through probably when he gets the Snoopy ear, and they just committed to that. It has to stay there now. And so that's just details like that are the ones that kind of stuck out to me also, that don't have to do with like the world building and stuff like that. Just having the commitment to do something and stick to it is something that I can appreciate also. And we do have a good voice cast here. Obviously, Mulaney and Sandberg are great and have this sort of chemistry, even if they didn't record together, you can still really sense it. And it's like, and they have, you know, characteristics of themselves you can kind of see coming through. Like, there's a moment when Chip comes home, and it's present day now, and he sees his answering machine blinking, and he's like, oh, there's a message on my landline. I don't like that. And it's like, that's exactly something Mulaney would say. So, you can get that a lot, but it works for the characters when you can see, you know, like, Mulaney and Sandberg actually in them, and actually in their deliveries, and the characters themselves. And the fact that, you know, they do the thing where Dale has kind of moved forward, and now he's part of the 3D CGI animation that we saw with like the Chipmunk movies and stuff like that, and Chip is still, you know, 2-dimensional. That, especially since they're interacting through the whole movie, it's especially interesting to see those kind of animations like working together and clashing together. In this, well, clashing would be negative, but it somehow works. And we've got, you know, funny characters here like J.K. Simmons, as what is he, the chief or something. And he's this, I don't know if he's a pre-existing character or not. He's clearly like this Gumby knockoff character, which is eventually mentioned. And he has things that, like, you know, stick to him a lot. And there's a moment where one of the characters is stuck to him, which is really funny. Where it's like, hey, you've got that thing stuck to you, and oh, you've also got Officer O'Hara stuck to you. That's really funny. And J.K. Simmons' commitment to his voice work always is great. But as far as the characters around them, like, there's another character here that like joins up with them that's a human character, because we weren't going to be able to avoid that, because we never can. And those are the characters that don't really have much life to them and just kind of feel like, you know, plot pawns or whatever. So that's really, like I said, you can be really overwhelmed by the detail and the world building and stuff like that, and there's always something to spot in the background. Another thing I noticed was one of them's walking down the Hall of Fame at one point, the Walk of Fame at one point, and the stars are like all animated characters, like Squidward has a star and stuff like that. And like I said, you can take all those in, and that's great and clever for a while. But then after a while, everything's just kind of exhausting. And, like, it kind of runs out. Once you're like, yeah, we understand how clever you are. We understand you're referencing a lot of things now. It starts to run out, unfortunately. Because when it starts, it's really easy to get pulled into it. And you like, bask in just how many different things you can recognize and see all the different clever things they've done for this world. But once they actually have to bring a plot into it, you could sense where they kind of... There's one thing they forgot to focus on when they were focusing on all those other details, so that's kind of unfortunate. But it's still really fun, and like I said, that it's willing to be as clever as it is, or at least try to be as clever as it can be before it finally runs out. It's still fun. Honestly, if I just have one more thing that kind of annoys me, it's the fact that Sweet Pete is voiced by Will Arnett, and it's like I'm just so fucking sick of Will Arnett's voice at this point. He's in every fucking animated movie, and it's usually, you know, a villain's voice or whatever, when he's not doing Lego Batman. But like, when you see the movies within the movie also throughout, like Batman vs. E.T. and stuff like that, that's one of those things where we see a billboard that's funny, but then they keep elaborating, so we end up seeing a clip of Batman vs. E.T., and it's like, whatever. So, yeah, they have a lot of really great stuff here, and I really, really loved this for about 45 to 50 minutes of its about an hour and a half runtime. When the credits start, I think it's like just shy of an hour and a half, and it's, the director is, Akiva Schaffer, of course. All three Lonely Island guys are around here. I think the third one is doing like various voices. So that's in general is going to bring something. I've mentioned many times before that Popstar Never Stop Never Stopping is probably one of the funniest movies ever made, and I will still stand by that. And you can get a sense of stuff that clever coming into this, but like I said, unlike Popstar, this sort of runs out of steam after a while. Once you get what's going on and you get like, oh, this is what we're doing, and then you realize that that's pretty much all that it has, then it starts to wear off a little bit. But it's still fine, and I still commend it for existing, and I'm happy that it exists, but it only goes so far. So let's go to our second movie, which is The Bad Guys, which I missed in theaters, but now is floating around. And I was really surprised, because when I heard about this movie's existence, I was just kind of writing it off, because it's like, oh, it's another animated movie, and I just don't really care that much. Even though I saw the cast list, and the cast list was great, but it's like, yeah, but all, you know, animated movies have like star-studded casts anymore, so that doesn't really make a difference anymore. And most of them are just, phoning it in anyway. Probably sometimes literally in these times. But I had started to hear really good things about this, and really interesting things about what exactly this was. And so when I sought it out, I was kind of... My expectations were a little raised, which is probably a bad idea, but they surprisingly remained there as it went. Because as it starts, I had heard Tarantino's name thrown around, and I had heard Elmer Leonard thrown around, and it was like, isn't this like an animated? Not to bash animated movies, just in general, but I mean, it was like, how does a movie like this do that exactly? And yeah, when it literally fades open, we have two characters who are the wolf and the snake, who are Sam Rockwell and Mark Maron, both perfectly cast, basically talking about their criminal life in a diner. And it's like, okay, yeah, we fade in and they're talking about crime in a diner. And then a crime takes place. And so it's like starting in a diner and then a crime taking place. That's how Reservoir Dogs started. That's how Pulp Fiction started. And it's like, okay, I can see where this is going. And of course, obviously, Tarantino said many times that Elmer Leonard is a huge influence on him. Even before he adapted one of his books, he was always a really big influence on him. So, yeah, surprisingly enough, they made an animated movie that kind of channels Tarantino in a way. It's in chronological order, mostly. So it's not like it's not something that they completely... like where it's just that one thing, which is something I definitely commend it for, where it's like, yeah, that's the thing, is you could tell it wasn't trying to, like, take something from something the whole time, like a lazier movie would do. It was like, you just got little glimpses and feels of the movie's inspirations, and then it would just kind of do its own thing, which I actually really appreciate, especially in animated movies. Animated movies can get really reliant on stuff like that, but, what's interesting also is after we meet all the characters. At first I thought it was going to be one of those cases where there were too many characters, like, in their group, and some of them would just be, like, here pointlessly and not have much purpose. But they all kind of get their multiple moments to shine, big moments and small moments. Where we have the tarantula that's voiced by Awkwafina, and the piranha that's Anthony Ramos. And it's like they all have the shark, who is Craig Robinson. And all these characters have different personalities, and they all work in this group well, and they all have their different things going on, like the things they can do. And so when it actually gets to a point to where they are committing a crime, typically this would be the part in an animated movie where things get really, like, dumb and slapsticky, and things are just moving around to keep your children entertained. But the fact that, like, every character had their own specific thing that they did, I found really interesting, and the way they all fit into this so well. And the fact that here's the biggest thing of all, the most crucial thing of all to make something like this work. This movie is really, really funny. Like, much more so than I thought. And all the time, like, I can't, like, even when the characters get to their point where they're, like, getting mad at each other and breaking up and stuff like that, the next joke or the next funny moment isn't very far away. And the fact that they kept that up the whole time is something that tends to go by the wayside in way too many movies that set themselves up as comedies, is they literally forget to be funny after a while. And the fact that this movie is, like, always funny all the time is such a big factor of why it works so well, I think. And it's and yeah, it does have, stuff that's like even when you just look at their appearances, like, you do have stuff where, like, the snake appears to be dressed like Depp in Fear and Loathing, and I like just the little detail that the shark wears one of those shark tooth necklaces. It's just like, I don't know if that's eerie or funny or what, but maybe a little bit of both. Which would be, it would show off this movie's sense of humor very well. But they also have really funny takes on, like, different tropes. Like, there's a moment that was just very funny to me, where the piranha is tiny. Okay, he's like this big. And there is a human person that he has followed into the bathroom, and the idea is he's going to do that old trope where you take the person that works there's uniform, and then you disguise yourself, and that's how you can go through. And so even though this is a human person of full size, and it's this tiny piranha, they go into the bathroom stall, the door closes, we hear a scuffle, and the door opens, and the human is, like, in his underwear sprawled out, and the piranha is in that guy's uniform, but the uniform is now down to his size. Somehow. And it's like, jokes like that are really funny, because it's like, because where we were talking about, you know, tropes being used as a crutch in Chippendale, where it was like, oh yeah, we're doing a cliche. As long as we say it's a cliche, then it doesn't matter. It's a joke now, apparently. But here it actually takes the tropes and makes like new jokes out of them, and makes them. Anytime we see a trope, it's actually funny when it happens, as opposed to, oh, we're just doing this now. Like it's not just that the trope is the joke. They usually take it one step further, which is great. And then as far as the dialogue goes, there's like obviously clever insults throughout because they're all bad guys. But the thing about it is, this is what I was talking about also, where it's like when you can tell they're kind of trying to evoke some sort of style from a particular person or particular people. That it's not just that. Like, you could sense, like if somebody was trying to do Tarantino dialogue or something, immediately you'd probably think the dialogue comes off as trying too hard. Like, trying too hard to be clever or something like that, or biting or whatever. But here, it never feels like it's... You can sense that it's snappy, but it never feels like it's really trying too hard. Where it's like... And they don't linger on things. Like, that's something that a lot of... movies like this tend to do, is if they find a joke, they want to just linger on it. I'm not meaning to everything I bring up that I'm saying this does better than a certain thing sounds like something I just criticized Chippendale for, which was not my intention, but that's... Yeah, just the fact that they don't linger on stuff either. They know when the joke is over and they go to the next one. Is something this movie does really well. And the way it just sort of embraces absurdity. There's so many jokes in this movie I appreciate just for like the absurdity. There's a moment where there's a scientist or something with a mustache, and so the shark gets the idea to pose as this scientist's father. So what he does is, he's clearly the shark, he's huge, and he puts on a lab coat, glasses, and a fake mustache, and says, "Hey, I'm your dad." And it and it works. And it's he was much more successful with the fake mustache than King Shark was. That's for sure. But yeah, that's the thing too. Is normally I'd say, "Hey, we just saw this joke," but this is like, it's done a different way, obviously, than the Suicide Squad. But that's just another joke I really appreciate, just for the sheer absurdity of it, because they just go for it, and you just have to go with it. And when that's done well, that's something I can definitely get on board with. There's also visual jokes everywhere that are really great. There's a moment when the snake unexpectedly has to pose as a martini glass. It just comes from out of nowhere and works. There's a moment where the tarantula gets fingerprinted. That's just a really funny visual. And whenever the snake is handcuffed, because he's a snake, it's just both cuffs just like around his body. That he could so easily slither out of, but he doesn't, because in universe he's handcuffed. That's great. I love that. I love the commitment to just that sort of thing, and just like, if you're gonna run with it, then you're with us. If you're not gonna run with it, then I'm sorry, it's not working for you. But I was on board for all this. There's even a moment where. Obviously, in a lot of animated movies now, we have the musical interlude. And typically it's like, oh, if there's somebody in the voice cast that just inexplicably, that cast inexplicably just so they can sing, it's like, oh yeah, we're getting a musical number. And yeah, Anthony Ramos is one of them. But what's great about this is the musical interlude, not only is it actually fun, and there's funny moments within it, it serves a purpose. Because while this musical number is going on, they are committing a crime. And it's like, it's so refreshing to see this musical break in an animated movie that's not really a break at all. Like, everything's still moving. And it's like, it does like everything right that seems so wrong in so many animated movies now. And so it just felt refreshing all over, which is great. And it does take eventually some obvious and predictable turns, but because everything else is working so well, because like I just talked about that with Chippendale, where it's like, they have all this stuff going on that does work for a while, but it's their plot that's lacking and the turns that are lacking. Um, but I feel like you have to find a certain stride if you're gonna say, oh, but disregard this thing. Where it's like, it didn't feel. The turns in this feeling predictable didn't feel lazy or anything. It just felt like everything was just kind of moving anyway, because the movie has a steady pace to it the whole time. Like, I don't really recall a moment it felt like the movie slowed down, because like I said, even in the breakup period where, Snake gets mad and goes his own way and takes everybody with him, um, they also set up the dynamic enough that I didn't hate that scene, despite how cliche it is, because how they set up that they're all bad guys and they supposedly don't have much emotion and stuff like that, they don't have time for that kind of thing. There's still these moments, like these little touching moments that show off their friendship, like this whole thing where after a heist they'll all take like a picture together, and then their refrigerator's like full of these pictures, and it's like touches like that that they don't even really draw much attention to until much later, were things that were already sticking out before they became crucial. So yeah, and not to mention our not so surprised antagonist here being a guinea pig named Professor Marmalade, played by Richard Iowati. That's just three things in a row that are working for me. So, yeah, so I was just really, really into this, much more so than I even thought I would be. Like, it's even, like I said, there were like three layers to it, because there was, oh, it's another animated movie, I don't really care that much. I wish I did, but I really don't. But then I started hearing really good things, and it's like, okay, that's interesting, I guess I'm a little peaked now, and, yeah, and then it went up even farther, because even with those new expectations, it was still much better than I thought it would be. And it's like, this is what I wish a lot of these... if more animated movies, those ones that are always coming out, were more like this, and clever like this, then I probably wouldn't feel as distanced from them as I do now. With just the occasional ones like Encanto coming in to make me say, oh, yeah, okay, I can actually connect to them again. So, but yeah, I really, really like this one a lot. So, yeah, like, this is the kind of stuff you should be showing your kids if you just need the TV to babysit them for a while or something. Like, give them something that's actually really, really funny and really clever and knows what it's doing and isn't just trying to do, the easiest thing possible just to distract for a while. And actually uses all of its, resources whenever everything's set up. So that's more like what a normal animated movie should be like, I would say. So, let's end on Senior Year. A Netflix comedy starring Rebel Wilson. That's just a lot of words I don't like hearing together. So the first thing, I don't want to... I hate the idea of just going into something saying this is gonna suck. But it's a Rebel Wilson movie on Netflix. And I'm not really a Rebel Wilson fan, as you know. So, like I said, I don't like to just go into things with negativity, but I mean, I just started it. And just the very first thing that came out of my mouth, just as soon as the Netflix logo came up, was, why the fuck is this almost 2 hours? And it's like, that's, when you turn on a movie like this and you see that runtime, you just know it's not warranted. Just right away, that's the first thing you know, is there is no possible way a movie like this warrants an hour 50-something. No way. And yes, it did start to prove that very quickly. So, the idea here is that this character starts off in, 2001 or 2002? I guess it'd be 2002, because it says 20 years later. Angry Rice from, The Nice Guys and the Spider-Man movies and stuff like that, is playing the young Rebel Wilson surprisingly well. And, like, not just, the personality and all that, but, like, the way she delivers her lines, even, you can tell she's doing, like, the Rebel Wilson thing, which was pretty impressive. And we're getting this whole setup of it being this teen movie from, like, the early 2000s, and we have all the references, in case you don't know. But it's also making references to other... You can tell how badly it wants to evoke and reference, other teen comedies from the past, like the fact that as soon as it starts, we get this scene between her friend Seth and her dad. Her dad is Chris Parnell. And it's clear they're doing the John Cryer, Harry Dean Stanton thing in Pretty in Pink, and he's like her ducky and stuff like that. And it kind of blew my... I was like, am I hearing things? As soon as it immediately occurred to me, okay, he's the ducky of this, we learned that her actual boyfriend's name is Blaine. So they just went full Pretty in Pink. So, and then the guy that's obviously not Andrew McCarthy is going to eventually grow up into Justin Hartley. And that's her sort of target, her love interest. But they do something really weird here. Actually, there's a few things here that I had a lot of questions about at the start here. So, when it starts, she's just moved over from Australia, and so she's seen as this weird outcast, especially by the popular girl, Tiffany, I think her name was. And Tiffany is with Blaine at this point. And so they're at the bowling alley, and they're like, oh, you're weird, you're an outcast. And then Blaine goes away with Tiffany. And then she looks at this magazine or something, gets this idea of like, oh, I know what I have to do. I just have to do this and I'll be popular. And she just does the things in this magazine that we don't really see. But then just like after a 5-second montage, she's the most popular kid in school and she's dating Blaine. And I felt like I blacked out or something. But that's just happening now. So she's just popular now. Forget the whole outcast. That's a whole thing we could have fucking skipped. Is the outcast thing. She's just popular now. Okay? And you have to run with it. And she's dating Blaine. But here's the thing is, they're literally talking... Seth and her dad are literally talking about the fact that she's dating Blaine. And the prom is coming up. And her dad says, you know, are you going to ask my daughter to the prom? It's like, isn't she dating Blaine? And then it's a whole setup. There's a whole lead-in when they drive to school together. He's going to ask her to prom. And it's this big lead where he's like, he's getting ready to ask, and she's like, oh, yeah, I know what you're going to ask me, and yeah. And then the payoff is, yeah, you can come to my after party. And it's like, oh, and he's shut down, and it's like, isn't she dating Blaine? Why is he asking? I don't, and it doesn't, it doesn't matter that, you know, Blaine's this, you know, jockey doofus or whatever. So the whole beginning of this, I didn't know what the fuck was even going on. Like, I felt, a movie like this should not be this confusing in its first 10 minutes. But anyway, she goes into a coma because her cheerleading thing goes wrong and she almost dies. When she wakes up 20 years later, she's Rebel Wilson and she wants to go to the prom still. And so then we get a barrage of references to new technology. It's one of the... In 2022, we're getting a movie where it's like, oh, hey, I'm out of touch with technology. Oh my god, phones are weird. Oh my god, there's a lot of Fast and Furious movies. That's basically what the rest of the movie is. So there's that. And them trying to recreate the teen comedy from years past and stuff like that. Like, you know, like Pretty in Pink already got brought up, but then, like, the 90s movies like Clueless. Alicia Silverstone is in this. And then, that's probably supposed to be a surprise, but she's in this. And then there's, you know, there's Mean Girls vibes. We can go to the 2000s. So it's trying to cover all of it. It's basically trying to WandaVision the teen comedy and put little bits of all of the decades in. And it's failing on all those grounds because it's not evoking anything. It's just referencing. And then when it does try to be its own thing, it is... We've been talking about cliches a lot in this video, and for the love of God, if there's one saving grace in this movie, well, first off, Rebel Wilson's looking like I bash Rebel Wilson how I just don't really think she's funny or that entertaining or that charming most of the time. She has her moments, but for the most part, I'm not really a fan. But I mean, if it's not too out of line, I will mention that she's looking really good these days, especially in that cheerleader uniform. That's that stood out. But, yeah, but if there's, like, one thing that comes out of this movie unscathed, it's that, Seth grows up to be, Sam Richardson, and they have pretty good chemistry, the two of them. So all the scenes with Sam Richardson worked. Except for one. When you think about not just cliches, but even more specifically, like, there's cliches, and then there's romantic comedy cliches, and romantic comedy cliches are especially infuriating, like, even more than a normal cliche. There's nothing more infuriating and time-wasting than romantic comedy cliches. So, what's, like, the first thing you think of when I say romantic comedy cliche? Is it the scene where the girl's, like, with a guy, or the guy is with another girl, and it's the person that they kind of wanted to start with, but not the person they're clearly about to end up with, and the person they're about to end up with comes in and sees this and misunderstands what's going on, and some character says, "You don't understand, I can explain," and the person walks away angrily, and we have to wait for them to resolve it. Despite trying to... I would bet fucking anything they would try to sweep this under the rug and say, "Oh, we're doing that on purpose because we're evoking other comedies and other romantic comedies." No, it plays it completely straight. And it doesn't feel like an homage, it feels like a fucking cliche. There is a difference. And it's... I could not believe my fucking eyes. We actually saw that cliche again. I honestly thought we might have been starting to move past it. But no, it's here, and it plays it really straight, and if you tell me it's just an homage to romantic comedy cliches, I'm gonna tell you to shove it the fuck up your ass. So, not only is that completely wasting our time, because I talked about the nearly 2-hour runtime. Remember what I was talking about before with animated movies and their cliches, and about how we have these, you know, musical numbers or dance numbers in the middle of it that just waste time? I've also talked about in the past, we just talked about He's All That last year, where Netflix romantic comedies are especially bad about this, or Netflix comedies in general. Netflix comedies love to just waste your fucking time. Like, that's literally what they were built for. Netflix does not give a fuck about you or anything. It just wants to waste your fucking time. So, yeah, it's not just animated movies that will throw in these musical numbers and these dance numbers for no goddamn reason other than to eat time and essentially eat away your life. And it's not just... You would think, yeah, it's about they're doing the cheerleading thing, so of course we're going to have to deal with that shit and grab a bunch of cheerleading numbers and stuff like that. It doesn't stop with that. We don't just get cheerleading numbers that go on forever. We get completely separate, full-on dance numbers in the middle of this that go on as well. And I honestly can't think of anything else in a movie like this that could be that big of a waste of time. They recreate fucking Britney Spears' Crazy video for no goddamn reason. No, not that. Not the crazy thing. But there is a dance number in this that they do fucking twice. They do the same dance number twice. They do it in the middle of the movie in its entirety, and then they do it at the end in its entirety. And it's... And it's supposed to be a callback of sorts. It is, and it's one of the jokes of time has passed is that this dance number is a reference to Darren's Dance Grooves, that fucking infomercial that played constantly in like the early 2000s. That reference is like one of the only funny things in this, especially one of the only funny things that relates to this goddamn dance sequence. So. There's that whole thing. Oh, I just want to throw something else, as a fuck you to this movie. Another thing they're showing to make the movie seem outdated is, in the early 2000s, her dad works at Blockbuster. And it's like, just reminding me that Blockbuster is a relic of the past, just makes me say go fuck yourself. Like, especially a Blockbuster coming from Netflix. And it's like, yeah, you know, Blockbuster failed because it didn't follow Netflix's thing, but it's like, to see where Netflix is now... the state that Netflix is in now, putting out movies like this, and it's like, really? You're gonna insult Blockbuster's corpse right now, Netflix. You fucking piece of you fucking low piece of shit. And it's like, that you even have the fucking arrogance and the audacity to put Blockbuster's good name in your own decaying mouth, is just absolutely go fuck yourself. And this movie also has the audacity to try to gain sympathy for for the main character, and it's like, for this movie to be as low as it is already, they actually get really, really desperate by, like, her mom has cancer. That's the tragic backstory of this character, and it's like, when these scenes happen, it just feels so, like I said, so desperate to squeeze out one iota of emotion, but in the most extreme way. Just feels gross. So that wasn't sitting well either. But I don't know. There's probably some stuff here that could be said about, like, coma accuracy, like when she wakes up and then there's one joke where she face plants, but then she's just walking around. Like, at the begin, I could go into all that and say, oh, look how shit this movie is, but it's like, I know this isn't a movie where I should worry about coma accuracy, and I'm not going to. There's so many other things that are wrong with this. That's the kind of the last thing I want to focus on. That's the one case where it's like, I don't care what you do, because that's not really what the movie is going for, and it's just not that kind of movie. You know, we're not going to have, you know, when you read Stephen King's The Dead Zone, like, read the book, and we get the whole process of Johnny coming out, of, like, having to go through the physical therapy and stuff like that. We're not going to get that here. It's obvious. But even leaving that aside, like, there's so many things about this movie you could go after. But it's like, no. I'm willing to approach this movie how it wants to be approached. And I still fucking hate you. So there it is. So, like I said, if there's one thing I can take away from it, it's that I don't dislike, like, Rebel Wilson in it. Like, I guess she's doing what she can. And she's not as, you know, reliant on her, you know, old jokes and stuff like that as she once was, but still, the writing, like, there's not really anything you can do with this. So that's all I can really say, I think. So, just another fucking Netflix movie for the fucking garbage. So, yeah, later this week or later next week, I will probably check out Downton Abbey and Men. And then we'll go into that and see what's going through Alex Garland's mind these days. And then we will move on to Top Gun, and then we should be done for the month, I think. And then we'll see whatever the hell's going on in June, which I don't know. So, in the meantime, we're going to have our next group videos in, I guess, about a week or so from now. And then, yeah, whatever's in between, which I don't know either. So I think that's it for this. So until whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.